this is my second video. I decided to make it in English, and maybe I'm gonna put a poll here or there or there or there, so you can decide if my third episode should be in German or in English. This episode I want to show you a track, how it's constructed from A to Z. It's not a finished track yet, it's one of the new tracks from my second album. I want to show you some in-depth techniques that I use that are not really particular to Bitwig, most of them at least, but anyway, it's going to be about Bitwig 2 again. Alright, so I'm going to need my headphones for this episode. As you can see, I set up my microphone here so you can hear my voice better. Also, I'm planning a future episode on optimizing the acoustics in this room a little bit. This song is called Auf Abwegen, and it's actually not a finished song. It's one of the songs that is going to be on my second album, and I thought it's interesting to have a closer look at this one because it's really in the making. What you see here is I have the master detail layout in Bitwig. I have here an overview of what's going on. In this case, I have the clip view and the mixer. And on the other side, I have a detailed view of the notes or the waveform and the devices. It's not arranged, there's no variations. So if I play it, you will just hear a loop of it. So you can hear it's a mellow track, right? It's an easy track. It's not such an energetic track. I have other tracks on the album that are very much like drama and action. And this one is more down to earth. So how it's constructed, I have 4 groups. That is actually a template that I use for all productions. All of them are basically divided in drums, bass, synth, FX. And if it has vocals, there's a vocal group as well. Usually I have all of these groups open. You see also there's like even subgroups in there with some samples and stuff that's going on. And actually I want to go from left to right and show you what's in there. So the first thing that you hear is the bass drum. And that is actually something I do very often. This bass drum is layered. It actually consists of 4 sounds. So the first segment of this sound is basically the oomph, if you want to call it. So it's like the deep frequencies. And here you also see I have some heavy EQing applied, so I cut all the higher frequencies. ProQ is basically a plugin that's more or less on every channel in my productions. Then I have a second layer to this kick drum here, which is more or less like a more mid-frequency oriented character sound. Then I have something that's more like a hi-hat, or en español, hi-hat. And in the end, I have a bass sound that gives the entire bass drum more of an instrumental character. It's more like an instrument itself than just a percussion instrument here. So again, you hear it's like a tone. Wait, can everybody see my vegan lanyard? Can they see it? Okay, I can see it. And this is one functionality that I love very much in Bitwig. Is called an instrument layer. So I can have basically one track, one set of notes, but it plays different instruments. And if you have a look at the different instruments here, most of them have a sampler in it, EQ in it at least. Some of them have even some special stuff going on. For instance, the bass sound here is custom tuned with an instrument device that is called note pitch shifter. Right, so this is the kick. And then we have all sorts of percussion instruments. And most of them are really highly processed. So here you see, for instance, a delay. You see an effect it's not an effect, it's a device in Bitwig that allows me to split the chain into a low and high frequency band. And something that I really do quite often, something I love, is put distortion on the high frequency band. I love this plugin, Soundtoys Decapitator. And in case of hi-hats and stuff like that, I really often use the punish function, which is like an extreme setting of the plugin. I don't go so much into the plugin. What I really love here is I can compensate the gain, because distortion usually makes the signal very loud. So I compensate it so that it's the same level, it stays the same level. And something that I have also on here is called Pan Shaper. It's a plugin from Cable Guys, and this is also something I use a lot. Makes a lot of movement. It makes the sound move in the stereo panorama, and especially for hi-hats and stuff like that, it's very interesting. I could also split the movement into different bands. So for instance, I could say the higher frequencies of a sound go from left to right, whereas the lower frequencies go from right to left. In this case, it's very simple. It's just go from right to left. The next sound I have here is the clap. This is a game of mine. I used to call the tracks funny names. It's something that my studio partner loves very much. He always says, what the fuck is Wackeldackel? And what is a Klatschpeter? And what is Knirpse? To me, it's all like different stories inside of a track. I have really like an image in my mind going on. So this is the Klatschpeter, it's the clap. Again, you can see in the chain for this instrument, I have an EQ, where very simple at that stage of a track. It's not really elaborate, but I just cut the low frequencies. In this case, I use SPL's Transient Designer, and then even on top of that, I use another plugin. It's called Multi-Transient by Audio Assault. It's one of the newer plugins I have. I have to admit, I'm a pluginaholic. I will do a special episode on this. I spend crazy amounts on plugins, and I think it's worth an episode to show you what I use. But this here, the great thing about this is I can work on transients and really split the bands. I have a low band, a mid band, a high band, and can basically push attacks or release cycles of the transients with this plugin. And especially for a super important part of the beat, the clap, you can make it super snappy with that. Then, as you see here, this is called Knirpse. In German, it makes sense. It's just a bunch of little animals that make some movement, some noise here. I have another companion here. It's called Top Gun. I don't remember why it's called Top Gun. It sounds a little bit like a machine gun. And then I have something is called Zwergenwelt. And this is actually something I have to give credit here to Polarity. Polarity released a YouTube video where he showed, I don't know the name, but I'm gonna put the link in the description, a very transformative, nice Bitwig device that makes click sounds, basically random click sounds. And I sampled these click sounds. These are right now audio files here, so it's no longer something special in Bitwig. It's really just these click sounds, and as you can hear, they also don't really follow the pattern of the rhythm here. So then there's the last thing to the rhythm here is called Zugabe, and this is basically something probably that will follow later in the arrangement. It's really like something that gives a little bit more power to everything. And it's an open hi-hat, which I call Offen für alles here. And then there's something that's called theater. It makes a little bit drama. And if we listen to these two together alone here, it's a group inside of this drum group. It sounds like this. The theater group here, or sorry, the theater track is something that uses a lot of Bitwig's new modulator devices. Maybe not in such a cool way, but it's interesting enough to show you. What I have here is basically a step sequencer, and to be honest, I just really drew something random in here, so to have something that provides movement. And this plugin here is called Tornado. It's a crazy plugin by Sugar Bytes, which actually in most of the cases is really not usable for me because it's too crazy. Yeah. It really mangles the sound. I really want, yeah, I want. But what I do here is it has a section that is called Dictator. And in this section you can basically, with a scroll wheel, modify the volumes of all the different effect chains. And what this is doing here is more or less randomly jump around in this section and provides a lot of movement. Like there's granular synthesis going on, beat repeating, panorama automation and stuff like that. And then I have another modulator here, which is called Random. And the Random modulator basically modifies the position of the dictator and the dry wet signal. So this is a drum group. At this stage of the song, I'm sure there's going to be more in there once I start to arrange, but let's have a listen again to just the drum group. It's like, it's an opportunity for me to dance, or I walk like here and say, fuck, I'm late for the meeting. Oh, yeah. Especially corners and stuff. Crazy. Great, so that's the drums. Maybe something that's interesting for you guys that don't know Bitwig. What is really cool in Bitwig is you have here a lot of tracks very fast. If you work on a big project, this is a small project, it's not even finished. But if you work on a big track, you can see this when I'm scrolling here, you end up with hundreds of tracks. And something that's really cool, you can enter these groups in Bitwig. And I put a shortcut on it so I can just hit Command and arrow down, and then I focus on this drum group. So I only have the drum group now visible. I can go out of this group, and here I have a navigator and, for instance, jump into the bass group. And then you see I only have one track in the bass group, or I can jump to the synth group, and I really can focus on this particular group then. So let's jump to the bass group right now. It's a very simple group here. It only has one track. The track, the device chain here this is something that originates probably from a Bitwig 1 project. I don't use these anymore in Bitwig 2, but in Bitwig 1 you had these devices that were the modulators. Now you can actually add modulators to every device, but this is a LFO device. Here I have the instrument that actually creates the sound. Let me quickly adjust the size of the plugin. This is an Arturia V Collection plugin, CS80V. And what I basically do with this LFO here is, and you can check this if you go here and say only show automated parameters, then you see that this LFO device is modulating the cutoff and gives a little bit of life to the bass sound. What I also do here is I have a band splitter device here. It's a Bitwig native device. It's called multiband. And I have different effects for the mid band. Obviously, again, we already know Decapitator is on the mid band here. In a very moderate setting, is really only touching the tip here. In the high band, I have another set of Decapitator, but with a little bit more aggressive tone controls. I only push the brightness here and have the punish feature again. And this really gives character to the sound. If I disable this device, you can hear it. That's how the sound would actually sound. And then I go with these distortion devices in different bands. And it becomes really lively. So the third group is the synth group. And the synth group is, in this case, really something that I think is quite a trademark of my productions. Nothing really follows a certain length pattern. Everything has different lengths. Here you can see, for instance, this is 10 bars and 3/4. And the second loop here, for instance, goes 4.2. The third loop is 4.2 as well. And then we have an 11, exactly 11. The point is, I want to say, I often really produce or try to produce music that has a life of its own. It's not really something like just a loop that repeats itself and is the same all the time. I also like this when I'm recording. You know, you have to imagine these modulators that you use in Bitwig a lot. Of course, they do what they want, right? And every time you print a track, sounds a little bit different. It's really an interesting concept. So let me show you the tracks here. Maybe, as you can see, most of these tracks here have Arturia's V Collection plugins on them. This was basically something when V Collection 5 came out. It started as a demo session. I wanted to try out all the plugins. So this is the first track, very simple. The second track is a longer track. Something that's special on this maybe is this Omega Transformer plugin, which gives a little bit of character, drives the sound a little bit like distortion. And then obviously I have some multiband stuff going on here as well. You can see here that the high and low bands of this track is modulated by something. This is basically modulated by the bass bus, which is not running right now, so you cannot see it. But I do this a lot, really. I try to make room for different kinds of sounds by modulating their loudness with other sources. So maybe it makes sense to show you this quickly. So if I go again and activate the bass as well, then you should be able to see this here. Now you see it. You see that the low band is really pushed down, whereas the high band is pushed by another, and this is the kick drum, right? So the kick drum is actually accentuating the sound, makes it brighter, and the bass sound is pushing the low frequencies away. So it's a little bit like sidechain compressing, but I like it a lot more because it's not, you know, there's a lot of talk going on about breathing, like now it breathes, you know, the compressor makes it breathing. Oftentimes I don't really like that. I like it more if you just modulate the bands, and in that case I'm doing this. This is another sound, very simple. I only have the instrument and then an EQ on here. Again, I said Pro Q2 is basically on every track. Then decapitator again to give some more character here on this instrument, and the little radiator is also a plugin of the Sound Toys bundle. It's also very nice. I use distortion a lot actually, just to make sounds more interesting. This is like a guitar-like sound, I think. Have a listen. Right, and here I use Native Instruments guitar rig, which goes crazy here loading something right now. But again, it's basically distortion and some echoes and reverbs and stuff like that. I actually like this one a lot, is Driving. On here also, Devil Lock is a distortion plugin. I have Tool on here. Tool is a Bitwig device, and again here I'm using some sidechains, some audio sidechains, trigger some other sounds to basically lower the volume here of this track. And this again gives the same, more or less the same effect than with sidechain compression. What I also have in this track here is TB303. People who follow my music, they know I love TB303s. Actually, this is something that I once bought and never used. It's called Fossion by D16. Usually I use ABL3 by Audio Realism. So Fossion is another emulation of the TB303. Has a little more possibilities to tweak the sound than the original, and in that case it's I like it very much. It's the same melody, but what you see here, you can also see it on the level meters. They actually go in the opposite direction in panning. So I have on both tracks here, I have the Cable Guy's Shaper Box plugin, and I really hard pan these signals left to right, but in the opposite direction. This gives room to both these sounds, which basically play the same melody. And then I have this sound, which again uses the Omega transformer. Is a lot of compression on, distortion on it. And then some percussive sound in the end. Great, so have a listen to all of it. Oh, wait, what I maybe can show you is the master track. This is something, is part of my template. It's not really used right now, but just to show you how I work here. On the master track, I have like these groups. It's called chain in Bitwig, and you can put devices in these groups and activate them. As you can see, the gray ones here are deactivated. I only have activated the limiter group right now. And this is actually an awesome plugin here. Mellow Muse LM1V is really my most used limiter. So what I have here is I have an EQ stage, a compressor stage, a refinement stage where I put in like saturation plugins and stuff like that, tape saturation, a limiting stage, and an analysis stage. And the analysis stage is basically Bitwig standard devices. I have the spectrum analyzer and the oscilloscope here. So because I am working on this, on the signal here, on the master signal, I can then really see precisely what's going on. This analysis here is, for instance, showing in blue what's coming into the channel and in red what's going out. So right now it's not a lot going on here because again it's still in the production phase. But if it would be a final song, I would then be able to really see how much I push the signal, how much loudness I gained with the processing that I do here. And of course, something similar, if not the same, is going on the groups here, but this really in an early stage. I have probably on all of the groups a glue, compressor, and if you have a look at them, this is actually quite aggressive. Probably I would go and tame that down a little bit later, but all of these groups right now have a glue compressor, which is also like a go-to plugin that I like to use. And what I have on the bass group here again is a multiband device, and I use the kick to lower the bass volume of the bass line. And that's it. All right, that was it. That was my second episode. I hope it was inspirational and interesting. And please let me know again if you want my third episode to be in English or in Deutsch, so I can prepare myself accordingly. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Ja.